Why aircraft manufacturers are overstepping the line in civilian oversight of the military. An analysis of aircraft manufacturers Boeing and Lockheed Martin and their influence over Congress. This is going to be a research topic over the overstepping of private companies, civilian oversight on Congress, and the military in which Congress oversees. Civil-military relations. The concept of civil-military relations is that both civilian society and military society exist, and must operate in a way that allows each to function to its full capacity. Both have their own set of morals and principles in which they operate in order to achieve their goals. The connection between the two being that the civilians provide the means for the military to operate, and the military in return provides safety and support for the civilians. Civilian oversight of the military. Civilian oversight is where the civilians of the state have the power over their military to ensure that its operations run smoothly and any insubordination can be dealt with in an objective manner. Some examples include a legislative branch having budget authority, an elected civilian leader being chief of military operations, objective control over the military's choice of action, understanding where the line of oversight really is, and of course having well-established institutions in both civil society and military society. Now, the United States of America has always seemed to be the ideal model for the civil-military relations. There's little chance of a military coup in the United States. We have a long history of professional soldiers and volunteer soldiers dating all the way back to the Revolutionary War. We have a deep American patriotism for the armed forces universally, so most Americans do respect our armed forces, and there is a large amount of civilian oversight that's embedded into the United States government, i.e. checks and balances. So, looking at this political cartoon here, you can see that. Anyway, sorry about that. But is it really? Is the United States truly the model for ideal civil-military relations? I don't know about that, considering that we have lobbying, and lobbying from private companies can really get in the way of civilian oversight, especially in an objective manner. Civilian oversight and private companies in the United States. Many in the United States will not hesitate to tell you that the people who run the government are to some level corrupted, and the corruption is usually from these private companies and their lobbying efforts. Congressmen and women are lobbied by these companies to vote on certain legislation that would help their company increase its profits or something of that sort. As a result, congressmen and women do receive contributions from the companies toward their political campaigns. Now, bad civil-military relations. Is lobbying really bad for civil-military relations? That's the question we're going to be trying to answer. That's why we did all this research. Are these private companies succeeding in their lobbying efforts and therefore increasing their profits? Are these companies involving themselves in oversight of military relations at all? And are these companies successful in actually changing the course of action of military society? That's what we're going to be looking at to determine if we really do have bad civil-military relations. Now, the two companies we are going to be looking at are going to be the Boeing Company and Lockheed Martin. These two are some of the biggest manufacturers of aircrafts in the United States and around the world. Different companies, though. Boeing is usually more large commercial jets, and Lockheed Martin is more highly sophisticated military aircraft, but nonetheless, both companies do contribute large amounts of money to super PACs, who in turn lobby toward congressional leadership on their behalf. So we're going to be looking at their lobbying contributions right now. So you can see we have Lockheed Martin on the left right now, and we see that Lockheed Martin started increasing the amount of money it was lobbying with starting around 2010, shifting most of its funds toward Republicans. Boeing here on the right, what we notice is that it's a little bit more even between the parties, but there is an uptick in the amount of money they are spending starting around 2008, 2010. So we're going to be looking at these companies both from around there, around 2008, 2010. So the Boeing Company, yes. So the Boeing Company right now is mostly giving a lot of its efforts toward the big commercial jets, the 787s, the megabuses, and all that. But they do have a history of military operations and building stuff. They built the B-52 Superfortress which is honestly that dropped the atomic bombs, I believe. So here we go. Boeing's profits. So this graph from Microtrends, it's a website that shows stock prices over the years, shows that there's a dramatic increase in the stock price of Boeing starting around 2010. And now this correlates to the previous graph where it shows that they increased the amount of money in their lobbying efforts around 2010. Now, what we did find, though, is that the Economicus website, The Fool, showed that Boeing's profits around this time were in large part due to their commercial aircraft production. But if you're wondering why we are talking about Boeing and the military, just so you have a little refresher, Boeing does have a long history of providing military aircraft to the United States and other countries. You have the chin hook right here, which is still in use today in many parts of the Middle Eastern war. You got the B-52 right there, and you have this P-8 Poseidon, which has actually been sold to a lot of countries in the Middle East and Arabian Peninsula. There is an article in CNBC talking about the Boeing company and its profits do happen to correlate with a escalation in tensions in the Middle East and Arabian Peninsula with certain countries, but the article from The Fool that we pulled out does show that this productivity in 2010, in 08 was the cause for the stock price increase in Boeing, and it wasn't in fact lobbying for military aircraft sales or anything like that. So we can conclude that Boeing most likely is not overstepping its civilian oversight in this case just because it's not profiting off of military aircraft sales. It's profiting off the manufacturing of commercial airliners and not the military sales. Now these guys, Lockheed Martin, they are selling military aircraft. They are selling bombs. They are selling missile defense systems. These are the ones who are stocking up the Middle Eastern countries with all kinds of weaponry to continue their war. So this most likely is going to be a case where we see lobbying doing a lot of effort to increase tensions in the Middle East. So we're going to see here again from microtrends.com is that there is an increase in the stock price of Lockheed Martin around 2010, same time as Boeing, same time as the escalation of the Middle Eastern conflicts. So we are seeing that businesses like Lockheed Martin are increasing their profits because of the sale of military aircraft. Now, it's a little interesting to figure out where the heck they got all this military stuff, all these contracts and stuff like that. Interesting to note that they get most of their contracts through governments, through the Pentagon. You see right here, you have the F-35. Most of these F-35s are made in the United States, and they are being sold to hostile nations in the Middle East. They are being sold to countries like Saudi Arabia, who are committing large amounts of atrocities of human rights acts violations over in Yemen. Lockheed Martin has a long history of selling these highly sophisticated weaponry. So what you can see is that Lockheed Martin, there is an increase in the amount of money that they are lobbying toward Congress, toward Republicans, around the same time that Lockheed Martin's stock price increased, around the same time that Lockheed Martin was getting large amounts of government contracts through the Pentagon to sell weapons to the Middle East and the Arabian Peninsula. So, we can conclude that its efforts in lobbying are working for getting it to increase its profits because it's lobbying the right people in Congress to right here. So the lobbyists under Lockheed Martin, we have Kay Granger on the Committee of Appropriations, Subcommittee of Defense. We have Ken Calvert, Republican, California, Committee of Appropriations, Subcommittee of Defense. Mike Turner, Republican, Ohio, Committee of Armed Forces. All three of these are the largest receivers of Lockheed Martin's contributions, and I wonder why. Maybe it's because they're the ones making choices on legislation that would affect Lockheed Martin's direct profits because they're the ones making choices on what is being sold in terms of defense spending. So, if three of Lockheed Martin's biggest receivers in contributions also happen to be ranking members on the Committee of Appropriations, Defense Spending, and Armed Forces, we can assume that they all voted on legislation that would benefit Lockheed Martin's profits, like the defense contracts related to Saudi Arabia and Israel, because that's how Lockheed Martin makes its money. So there could be some solutions to this rebalancing of the civilian oversight. They could ban the act of lobbying altogether. Congress could stop allowing the sale of weapons to states who are currently committing human rights acts violations or who are at war, or they could just, stop awarding big contracts to the companies like that and keep the military defense spending all internal for the United States, and maybe we can get a better military. Who knows? There are many ways to probably rebalance this civilian oversight. But in the long term, I don't believe that we are going to fix the civil-military relations in the United States just because the lobbying efforts of many of these companies are way too deep. Their pockets are way too big, way too deep inside of these politicians, and most of the choices about military operations is still considered objective. But we can see here that there are companies like Lockheed Martin who will lobby members of Congress to make military choices on their behalf solely just so that they can gain profit.